gentleman there. Okay. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, John Bailey. John Bailey, freelance journalist. A question.
No. What's your name?
John Bailey, freelance journalist. Can you ask members of the panel to speak about the prospects for talks between the Taliban, the coalition forces, Karzai's government, and the Pashtuns, please?
Okay. Thank you. Bob.
Chair, Bob Russell, I'm involved with Christian CND, but I'd like to pick up a point which, at least it came through to me, that Dawood raised. He mentioned particularly about Taliban propaganda constantly referring to casualties suffered by civilians and others as a result of Allied bombing and military activities. Let me also point out that when we hear the news in this country, all we ever hear about are Allied casualties, and in particular British service casualties. You don't hardly ever hear about casualties of the Americans or other service personnel out there. And are you therefore surprised that the general public gradually becomes more and more disillusioned with this whole business if we do not feel that we are being told truthfully what this war is really bringing about? And I do beg to differ with the General there. I think this, for most ordinary people like us, is war. It is not some intervention at the request.
Okay. Thank you.
My name is Andrew Warren from War on Want. I have a question. If the letter from the Minister read at the beginning of this meeting, and also what Peter Gilchrist said is correct, why are more and more members of the British Armed Forces becoming gravely concerned about what they're doing in Iraq and Afghanistan, even to this extent of one senior member of the British Armed Forces leading the recent anti-war march in London? The actual truth is, in the case of Iraq and Afghanistan, we have got no damn business to be over in the first place.
Okay, thank you. So the question about the prospects of
talks between the Taliban.
I'd just like to make two short points. One is about the question of negotiation with the Taliban, with the Pashtun Taliban. I think that at a certain point in the progress of any conflict, the business of supplying, in this case an occupying force of 100,000 plus a domestic military force of roughly the same equivalent, with its supplies of food and ghee and rice and whatever it needs to have to fight and to live on, generates in a country like Afghanistan such a huge industry of plunder that at a certain point it becomes unprofitable for people without many skills apart from using guns to actually make an agreement, to negotiate, because they're getting kickbacks at every single step of the way from Karachi. The Pashtun Taliban are getting kickbacks from the private security companies, they're getting kickbacks from members of government not to attack supply, getting kickbacks from the trucking companies. Of course, they're not going to give up the kickbacks. There's got to be something above the kickback. So I'm not sure what that is. The second thing is that I think it ought to be made clear, and it never seems to be made clear, that the famous exit strategy that is always talked about, which is building up a combined police and army force of something like 400,000, is going to be paid for exclusively by the West, because Afghanistan doesn't have any money to pay for 2 soldiers' salary, let alone 400,000. Now, I've read a calculation. Well, it costs $1 million a year to keep an American troop on the ground and supplied in Afghanistan. You could probably get an Afghan troop for 150 without the supplies. So you're looking at $40 billion per annum for the foreseeable future.
Thanks, Michael.
It takes 5 years.
One second.
5 years before peace comes.
Okay, I'm going to take 3 questions from ladies. On
Yeah, there's a lady.
1, 2, and 3. Okay, your what's happening is
the lady here.
Oh, you have to
decided. Lady.
Oh, sorry.
The question I wanted to ask is, we heard an awful lot about the what you wanted to provide for Afghanistan, security, and I don't think anybody in this room would argue with security, civilization, a ceasefire, security for schools, a better life for the Afghan people. But nobody here has really articulated in any better terms than our government currently is as to the how. How would you intend to propose to implement all of those measures, all of those Nirvana measures, which are absolutely fantastic, and I don't think anyone would disagree with. But how would you, any of you, intend to impose those without some form of military intervention?
Thank you. So the speakers need to concentrate on the mechanism for how to do it. You didn't give your name.
Sorry, I'm Jack Fletcher.
From?
I'm in the military.
Okay, fine. The lady over there.
About 6 weeks ago.
Okay.
Hannah Byers from the Royal Navy. I noticed that a number of the speakers mentioned the strategic communication message in Afghanistan, and I wanted to ask the panel, and particularly those with the media background, how they think we can encourage the media to cover stories of stabilisation, stories of development. Because my personal experience, having recently returned from the PRT, the Provincial Reconstruction Team in Helmand, the Provincial Reconstruction Team, when I return and I talk about the work that I was doing there, involvement in training the female Afghan police, working with the line ministries, meeting with the Department of Public Health, Ministry of Agriculture, all of these different areas. People are fascinated by this information. They're really interested to know about it, and I don't feel it's perhaps getting a balanced picture. So I'd be interested to know how people think we can encourage that story to be heard.
Thank you. One more minute.
Why were you there?
Yes.
You shouldn't have been there at all.
At least we are having a healthy debate. Okay, Hilda?
Hilda, representative of International Peace Building. Basically in the same vein, you talked about the proportion of 80% civilian and 20% military action in any kind of COIN operation. Now, irrespective of the disagreements in the room about the other issues that are terribly important, I just wanted to ask you again how you see the work across Whitehall to really put some money and resources behind the civilian activities that would be the essential background to provide the kind of stabilisation that the military is supposed to be supporting. And I think a lot of discontentment in the military is about feeling left in the lurch by the people who are actually really meaning to be there to do the work that everybody else in the peace camp also does, namely to resource people to lead a better life through health, education and security.
Okay, thank you very much. So, the lady for the mechanism and the other lady and then yeah.
She took her shot.
I think we start from this side, the panel. Answering. Have you got anything?
I think I agree with you with this issue of there not being the military in implementing some of these things that have been hopefully wished for as kind of Christmas present for Afghanistan. So I agree with you that it's not talked about. But the only way it can be talked about, really, while at the same time addressing the concerns of the parents of British fighters or people in this room with an opinion, is it has to be done by Afghans. It has to be done by Afghan military and Afghan police. Now, as far as my study goes, it's very, very difficult to kind of train an Afghan to be, let's say, number one, a good soldier, or to be a good officer, because there's no structure of officer class. There's no command and control top down in Afghanistan, really. Or if there is, it's Soviet-based. It's that old stuff. And so the kind of modern army that you're expecting to do some of these things, or to kind of create security, or a modern police force, doesn't have that kind of forensic ability to cope with the kinds of problems it's facing.
Thank you. Bruce?
I'm quite lost because actually I don't think we're there, or we're not told we're there, in order to build hospitals, schools, homes, and that kind of stuff. We're there to prevent terrorism on British streets. If we want to go around building hospitals, I'm all for it. The military costs $1.25 trillion a year globally. If we could spend some of that money on global hospitals, it would be wonderful. But why are we in Afghanistan? Is it to provide hospitals, or is it to stop terrorism? The people who actually seem to be supporting the occupation or the military, they haven't made that link at all so far, and I wish they would.
Thank you.